It was a warm afternoon in a neighborhood that was usually quiet. People were going about their daily routines, some walking their dogs, others sitting on benches, talking or enjoying the sun. Children played near the sidewalks, their laughter mixing with the distant hum of cars driving by. Everything seemed ordinary at first glance, just like any other day. But in one part of the street, a small crowd was gathering near a corner store, and the atmosphere was slowly changing. There was tension in the air, though no one could say exactly when it had begun. The police officer assigned to patrol this area had been walking his usual route for years. He knew most of the faces in the neighborhood and was familiar with the usual small problems that came up. Today, his duty was routine, but he had received a call about a disturbance in front of the store. It was the kind of call that could be simple, a disagreement between neighbors or a loud argument over a misunderstanding, or it could be something more serious. As he approached, he noticed a young black girl standing at the center of the group. She seemed to be arguing with someone, her voice firm and her hands gesturing as she tried to make her point. The officer's first thought was to assess the situation calmly. He had learned over the years that rushing in without understanding often made things worse. He carefully moved closer, speaking into his radio to let his colleagues know his location. The girl noticed him immediately. Her eyes widened, not with anger at first, but with a sudden sense of awareness that someone in authority was approaching. She paused mid-sentence and looked at the officer, unsure of what to do next. Around them, the small crowd of bystanders watched closely. Some held phones in their hands, ready to record every movement. Social media had taught people to capture moments like this, and now every gesture and expression had an audience beyond the street itself. The officer tried to make his presence calm but noticeable, taking measured steps so as not to appear threatening. His hands were visible at all times, a subtle signal that he was not aggressive, only cautious. The girl, however, did not know what to think. Her mind was racing. Arguments and confrontations had happened before, but this one felt different. The officer's uniform represented authority, and authority, to her, was unpredictable. She felt a sudden surge of anxiety. Every instinct told her to stand her ground, but part of her also wanted to run, to leave before things escalated further. She stayed put, frozen between her fear and her pride. The officer spoke gently, trying to get the girl's attention. He introduced himself by name, and then he asked her to calm down and step aside. His voice was firm, but it carried an undertone of patience. He had learned from experience that shouting or rushing in often made young people feel cornered. However, the girl misinterpreted his words. She had faced situations in the past where adults, even well-meaning ones, had spoken to her in a way that felt intimidating. In her mind, she braced herself, ready for whatever might come next. The crowd around them began to murmur. Some people encouraged her, cheering her on silently or openly, while others whispered warnings. Every movement of the officer, every glance, every shift in posture was observed, analyzed, and interpreted. The tension grew, almost imperceptibly at first, then more noticeably. Passers-by slowed down, curious about what was happening. Parents pulled their children slightly closer to the sidewalk, trying to shield them from potential danger, while others simply stood and watched, fascinated by the unfolding scene. The officer noticed the subtle signs of stress in the girl's body. Her hands clenched and unclenched repeatedly, and she shifted her weight from one foot to another. Her eyes darted toward the crowd and then back to him, searching for some kind of ally, someone who could help her understand what was happening. The officer realized that this was not just about a disagreement anymore, it was about fear, misunderstanding, and the need for careful handling. He continued speaking in a calm, steady tone. He explained that he was there to make sure no one got hurt and that he only wanted to understand the situation. He asked her to tell him her side of the story. But before she could respond, someone in the crowd shouted loudly, warning her to stand her ground and not trust the police. Another voice encouraged her to stay firm. Mixed messages swirled around her, adding to the pressure she already felt. The girl's heartbeat quickened, and she instinctively felt trapped between authority and the crowd, unsure of which side to trust. In that moment, a mixture of emotions ran through her mind: fear, anger, frustration, and confusion. She wanted to defend herself, to assert her right to be heard, but she also worried about the consequences. She had seen news stories, heard stories from friends and family, and knew that interactions with police could go wrong in an instant. Every instinct screamed that she needed to protect herself, but she also wanted to avoid trouble. Her body tensed, and she shifted her position slightly, trying to find a way to maintain control over the situation. The officer noticed her tension and tried to slow the pace. He took a step back, giving her more space physically, while keeping verbal communication open. He hoped that creating distance would reduce her anxiety, but the noise of the crowd made it difficult for her to feel safe. Every shout, every cheer, every murmur from the onlookers added to her uncertainty. She felt that she needed to act quickly, to make a choice before the situation spiraled further. At the same time, the officer remained alert. He understood that moments like this could change in a blink of an eye. He scanned the crowd, making sure no one else posed a threat. His eyes returned frequently to the girl, trying to gauge her emotions and anticipate her next move. He wanted to prevent escalation, to resolve the situation peacefully, and he knew that patience and clear communication were the keys. The minutes passed slowly. Every word, gesture, and expression mattered. The girl looked around, considering her options. She felt pressure from all directions: the authority figure before her, the crowd around her, and her own inner fear. She wanted to assert herself but also protect herself. The officer continued to speak calmly, offering reassurance, while the crowd remained a background of tension, anticipation, and judgment. This was the point where decisions started to form in the girl's mind. She weighed her options, thinking about what might happen if she cooperated or resisted. Her anxiety mixed with a desire to be heard, and she felt both small and powerful at the same time. In these few moments, the ordinary afternoon transformed into a complex situation of human emotion, misunderstanding, and anticipation. Even as the officer remained composed, he knew that the situation could go either way. He understood that the outcome depended not just on his actions but on the girl's perception of safety and fairness. Every interaction mattered: his tone, his words, his distance, and even his facial expressions. He carefully monitored her, trying to communicate trustworthiness and respect, while acknowledging that fear can override reason in intense moments. By now, more neighbors had come out of their homes, drawn by curiosity or concern. Some filmed with phones, some tried to intervene verbally, and others simply watched silently. The pressure of being observed added weight to the decisions that the girl and the officer were about to make. What started as a small disagreement had slowly escalated into a situation that demanded careful handling, patience, and understanding from everyone involved. The officer continued to offer reassurance, letting the girl know that he was there to listen and to prevent harm. He repeated his request for her to step aside, emphasizing that he wanted to hear her story and understand her perspective. The girl nodded slightly but remained wary, her body tense and ready to react to any perceived threat. Her mind raced, thinking of possible outcomes and trying to find a solution that would keep her safe while also standing her ground. At this moment, the ordinary street scene had transformed into a stage where fear, courage, and misunderstanding intersected. The people watching, the girl, and the officer were all participants in a silent negotiation, each influenced by past experiences, societal pressures, and personal emotions. Every second counted, and the tension was palpable. The officer, sensing the critical point, spoke with extra care. He emphasized that his goal was to ensure safety for everyone and that he respected her perspective. He hoped that his calm demeanor and willingness to listen would encourage her to respond in kind. Meanwhile, the girl considered her options carefully, aware that her next move could determine how the situation unfolded. In the final moments before the pivotal incident, the street seemed to hold its breath. The noise from the crowd continued, but the focus was on the interaction between the officer and the girl. Each side was trying to communicate, to understand, and to act in a way that felt safe. The ordinary afternoon had become a complex moment of human interaction, where fear, authority, and social dynamics collided in a way that no one could fully predict. The moments that followed were filled with a quiet tension that seemed to hang in the air, almost like the street itself was holding its breath. The girl's eyes darted back and forth, trying to read the officer's intentions. Every small movement he made felt amplified in her mind. To an outside observer, he was calm and professional, but to her, every gesture seemed loaded with potential danger. Her pulse raced, and she felt a lump forming in her throat. Fear and anxiety made her feel small, yet a strange surge of determination reminded her that she had to stand her ground. The officer noticed her unease immediately. He had seen similar situations before, where a young person, especially a teenager, felt threatened even when no immediate threat existed. He understood that in tense moments, fear could override rational thinking. So, he continued speaking in his calm, measured tone, hoping to guide the interaction toward understanding rather than conflict. He asked her again to step to the side and to explain what had happened. He wanted to listen, to understand her side, and to prevent the situation from escalating further. But the girl hesitated. Her thoughts were tangled. On one hand, she wanted to cooperate, to avoid trouble. On the other hand, her past experiences, the stories she had heard, and the advice of those around her made her question whether trusting him was the right choice. She remembered warnings from friends and family, always be careful around the police. Those words echoed in her mind, clashing with the officer's calm and respectful approach. She felt cornered, trapped between her instinct for self-preservation and her desire to do the right thing. The crowd that had gathered grew slightly larger. People whispered to each other, some offering support to the girl, others expressing concern about the officer. Their voices mixed into a low murmur that seemed to make the moment even heavier. Some people were recording with their phones, thinking this could become a viral video. Others were silently observing, unsure of how to intervene. Their presence added a subtle pressure, like invisible hands pressing down on everyone involved, making the situation feel even more critical than it already was. The girl's hands trembled slightly as she clenched them at her sides. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, feeling the weight of all eyes on her. The officer noticed these signs of nervousness, and he tried to give her more space, taking a step back. He hoped that creating a little physical distance would help her feel less threatened. But the girl's mind raced faster than her body could respond. Every step he took, every word he said, seemed to carry multiple meanings, and she wasn't sure which one was true. At that precise moment, a bystander shouted from the edge of the crowd, something meant to warn her, "Don't let him push you around." The words were not meant to provoke violence, but in her heightened state, the girl interpreted it as a signal that she needed to defend herself. Her chest tightened, and a wave of adrenaline surged through her. Fear mixed with defiance, and her instincts screamed that she had to act before she lost control of the situation. The officer noticed her sudden stiffness and raised hands slightly. He could sense that the situation was reaching a critical point. He spoke again, clearly and slowly, emphasizing that he did not want anyone to get hurt and that his goal was to understand what had happened. He reassured her that she was not in immediate danger and that cooperating would help everyone resolve the situation safely. But the girl's mind was spinning too fast. In her anxiety, she made a sudden movement, reaching instinctively for an object in her bag. The officer, interpreting the movement as potentially dangerous, instinctively reacted. He raised his hands defensively, signaling her to stop and stay calm. At that instant, the air seemed charged, every second stretching longer than normal. The crowd held its breath, sensing that the moment was about to reach a breaking point. Panic overcame the girl's reasoning. Her fear and confusion pushed her into action. She made a sudden move that would later be described as spraying something toward the officer's face. It was a quick, impulsive act, born out of self-defense instincts, not malice. The officer recoiled immediately, shielding his eyes and taking a small step back. Pain and discomfort shot through his face as the substance made contact, and he instinctively tried to regain control of the situation without escalating it further. The crowd reacted instantly. Gasps and shouts erupted in every direction. Some people moved closer, worried that the officer might be hurt. Others stepped back, afraid that things could get even more chaotic. Phones were raised to capture the incident, and the sound of distant sirens in the neighborhood seemed to grow louder in response to the tension. The officer blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision while keeping his focus on the girl. Despite the sudden pain, he remained composed, reminding himself that the goal was still to de-escalate. He spoke loudly, but with the same controlled tone, instructing her to stop and explaining that she needed to calm down immediately. He moved slowly, carefully maintaining his balance and ensuring that no sudden actions would make the situation worse. The girl froze for a moment, realizing what had just happened. Her heart pounded, and she felt a mix of shock, guilt, and fear. She did not intend to hurt anyone seriously, it had been an instinctive reaction to the fear she felt. She looked around, seeing the crowd's reaction, and understood that the moment had just escalated far beyond what she had imagined. Her hands shook as she tried to comprehend the consequences of her actions. The officer, even in discomfort, tried to reassure her. He emphasized that his main concern was everyone's safety and that no one wanted anyone to get hurt. His calmness in the midst of pain helped slightly reduce the girl's panic. She realized that despite what had happened, he was still trying to communicate with her without immediately using force. That understanding gave her a small sense of relief, though the fear and tension still clung to her like a heavy cloak. Neighbors and bystanders played a critical role in this moment. Some of them stepped forward, trying to mediate, speaking calmly to the girl, encouraging her to put down the spray and to step aside. Their voices, steady and reassuring, helped her regain some composure. Other bystanders continued to film, and some argued among themselves about what was happening. The combination of voices, advice, and observation created a complex web of influence, where each person's words could either escalate or de-escalate the situation. The officer, understanding the dynamics, maintained verbal communication with the girl. He did not raise his voice unnecessarily, and he continued to keep his hands visible, showing that he was not trying to hurt her. He repeated his request for her to stop, step aside, and explain herself. His patience, even under discomfort, was deliberate. He knew that if he reacted aggressively, it could trigger further panic or aggression. Slowly, the girl began to respond, her breathing heavy and uneven. Her fear had not disappeared, but she recognized the officer's calm persistence. She saw that while he was affected by the spray, he was still focused on preventing harm and understanding her perspective. For a moment, the chaos seemed to pause, and the focus shifted inward, toward finding a resolution. The situation had become a delicate balance of fear, authority, and human instinct. The girl's impulsive action had caused pain, but it also opened a door for communication. The officer's measured response, the bystander's intervention, and her own realization of the consequences began to create a path toward de-escalation. As the minutes passed, both the girl and the officer worked to regain control of their emotions. The crowd, sensing the shift, quieted slightly, giving space for communication to take place. The officer continued to speak calmly, explaining that he wanted to understand why she had reacted that way and how they could resolve the situation without anyone being hurt further. The girl, still trembling, began to explain her side. Her words were rushed, filled with emotion, and sometimes hard to understand. She spoke about her fear, her confusion, and how the pressure from the crowd and past experiences had made her feel cornered. She expressed that she did not intend to hurt anyone but had acted out of instinct. Her honesty, even in the midst of panic, was a small bridge toward understanding. The officer listened attentively. He acknowledged her feelings, showing that he recognized her fear and her perspective. By doing so, he slowly shifted the interaction from confrontation to dialogue. The girl's tension began to ease slightly, replaced by a cautious awareness that the officer's goal was not punishment but resolution. The crowd, noticing the change, also adjusted. Some lowered their phones, some whispered encouragement, and some simply observed quietly, understanding that the critical moment had passed, though the situation was not yet fully resolved. The energy of the street shifted from chaos to a more controlled tension, where dialogue became the focus rather than conflict. By the end of this part of the incident, the immediate danger had passed, but the lessons were clear. Fear, misunderstanding, and impulsive reactions could escalate quickly, but careful communication, patience, and understanding could prevent the situation from spiraling further. The girl's instincts, the officer's training, and the crowd's influence all played a role in shaping the outcome, reminding everyone that moments of tension are often complex and require careful handling. After the immediate tension on the street had calmed slightly, the reality of the situation began to sink in for everyone present. The girl stood in the same spot, her hands still trembling, as she tried to process what had just happened. She felt a swirl of emotions: fear, guilt, and confusion mingled together so strongly that it made her feel dizzy. Her heart was still racing, and her mind kept replaying the moment over and over, as if trying to understand why her instincts had pushed her to act so suddenly. She knew she had reacted without thinking, but she also wondered if, in some way, she had been defending herself. The officer, now wiping his face to remove the residue of the spray, observed the girl carefully. He felt the pain from the incident but understood that this moment was about far more than physical discomfort. It was a complex situation involving fear, misunderstanding, and community perception. He reminded himself that every choice he made in the next few minutes could shape the outcome for both of them. He needed to remain calm, fair, and compassionate, even though he had just experienced an unexpected attack. Nearby, the bystanders continued to watch with mixed emotions. Some expressed relief that no one had been seriously harmed, while others murmured their opinions about what had occurred. Some voices were critical of the girl, while others sympathized with her fear and instincts. Their reactions reflected a wide spectrum of human judgment, illustrating how quickly public perception can form in moments of tension. The crowd itself, once chaotic and restless, now seemed to shrink as some people quietly stepped away, unwilling to be part of a potential legal situation or further confrontation. The officer finally spoke to the girl in a steady, calm voice. He asked her to sit down on the nearby curb, assuring her that she was not in immediate trouble but that the situation needed to be clarified. His tone was firm but kind, a balance he had learned to maintain over years of dealing with tense situations. The girl hesitated but eventually complied, realizing that resisting might only make things worse. As she sat, she felt her body relax slightly, though her mind was still racing. Emergency services arrived shortly afterward. An ambulance pulled up, and paramedics stepped out to check the officer's condition. They also asked if the girl needed any medical attention, knowing that even moments of high stress can have physical consequences, such as fainting, rapid heartbeat, or shock. The paramedics' presence added a new layer of seriousness to the situation, reminding the girl that what had happened was not just a simple misunderstanding, it was an incident with real consequences. The officer, though still slightly uncomfortable, assured the paramedics that he was mostly fine, experiencing only minor irritation from the spray. He also took the opportunity to explain, calmly and clearly, what had occurred, emphasizing that the girl had acted out of fear rather than malicious intent. The paramedics listened attentively, nodding as they assessed the situation. Their professional approach helped to reinforce a sense of safety, even amidst the lingering tension of the incident. Meanwhile, the girl's thoughts drifted back to her life, to the choices that had led her to this moment. She thought about the friends who had warned her about being cautious around authority figures, about the stories she had heard about unfair treatment, and about the fear that had shaped her instincts so profoundly. For a moment, she wondered if her reaction had been justified, or if she had allowed fear to control her too strongly. The mixture of self-doubt and relief created an internal struggle she could not immediately resolve. Law enforcement officers from the local precinct arrived shortly thereafter to take official statements. They cordoned off the area slightly, not to punish anyone but to ensure safety and proper documentation. The girl was asked to provide her account of the incident, and the officer provided his perspective as well. Both accounts were important, not just for legal reasons but to understand the full context of what had happened. The process was methodical, careful, and designed to give both sides a voice. During this process, the officer reflected quietly on the situation. He understood that moments like this were never black and white. The girl's actions had been impulsive and potentially dangerous, but they had also been human, rooted in fear, confusion, and the instinct to protect oneself. He reminded himself that his role was not only to enforce the law but also to maintain empathy, to see the humanity in every person he encountered, even when mistakes were made. The girl, sitting nervously on the curb, began to feel the weight of community judgment. She noticed people whispering, some shaking their heads, others nodding in sympathy. She realized that public perception could be just as challenging to navigate as the actual incident itself. She took a deep breath, trying to focus on the fact that the officers were listening, that her side of the story would be heard, and that there was an opportunity for understanding rather than immediate condemnation. As statements were taken, the officers carefully explained the process to the girl. They reassured her that cooperation would not only help clarify the events but also demonstrate her willingness to engage responsibly. They emphasized that mistakes happen, especially in moments of fear, but that accountability and honesty were essential for moving forward. Hearing this, she began to feel a slight sense of empowerment, knowing that she had a chance to explain her actions and to participate in resolving the situation. The crowd, now reduced to a few onlookers, began to disperse gradually. Some remained nearby, curious about the outcome, while others left quietly, perhaps reflecting on their own experiences and fears. The noise of the city seemed to return, replacing the tension-filled silence that had dominated the street during the incident. The girl felt the weight of attention lifting slightly, allowing her to breathe more freely. During this time, the officer took a moment to speak privately with the girl. He asked her to share her feelings, not just about the incident, but about the fear that had driven her actions. She hesitated at first, unsure how much to reveal, but eventually began to speak. She described her fears, the pressure she felt from past experiences, and the split-second decisions that had led to the spray incident. She admitted that her actions had been instinctive and impulsive, but not intended to cause serious harm. Listening to her, the officer recognized the complexity of the situation. He understood that fear can override logic, that instincts can sometimes lead to mistakes, and that understanding those instincts is key to preventing future incidents. He nodded, acknowledging her perspective without judgment, and offered guidance on how to handle similar situations differently in the future. His calm approach helped the girl feel less defensive and more willing to reflect on her actions constructively. The process of investigation continued, with officers documenting statements, taking photographs, and collecting evidence from the scene. The girl and the officer both cooperated fully, understanding that thorough documentation was essential for fairness and accountability. Throughout this, the atmosphere, while still serious, was controlled and professional. Everyone involved seemed aware that the ultimate goal was understanding, safety, and resolution rather than punishment or blame. By the time the initial investigation concluded, the girl felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. She realized how quickly events could escalate, how instinct and fear could push someone to act in ways they might not intend, and how important calm communication is in moments of crisis. The officer, for his part, reflected on the importance of patience, empathy, and measured responses, knowing that his actions had helped prevent further harm. As the scene cleared, both the girl and the officer recognized the larger lessons from the incident. Fear, misunderstanding, and quick reactions can create dangerous moments, but empathy, careful communication, and listening can transform potential conflict into opportunity for growth and understanding. Each person involved had played a role, whether by instinct, training, or observation, in shaping the outcome. The girl, now more composed, thanked the officer for his patience and for listening to her side of the story. Though the incident had been frightening and chaotic, she realized that it had also been a moment of learning. She understood that fear can influence decisions, that communication can prevent escalation, and that acknowledging mistakes openly is a vital part of personal growth. The officer, in turn, expressed his appreciation for her honesty and cooperation. He emphasized that while mistakes happen, the willingness to communicate, to take responsibility, and to reflect on actions is what allows individuals and communities to grow stronger. He encouraged her to share her experiences with others as a way to help them understand the importance of calm, rational responses in tense situations. By the end of the day, the street where the incident had occurred returned to its normal rhythm. Life continued, but the events left a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed them. For the girl, the memory would serve as a reminder of the power of fear, instinct, and communication. For the officer, it reinforced the importance of patience, empathy, and professionalism. And for the bystanders, it was a lesson in observation, responsibility, and the impact of their presence in moments of tension. Even as the crowd dispersed and the evening approached, the lessons of the day lingered. Both the girl and the officer had faced a challenging situation, but through careful communication, empathy, and understanding, they had navigated a potentially dangerous moment safely. It was a reminder that human interactions are complex, that fear can influence behavior, and that listening and understanding are powerful tools in preventing harm and building trust. After the incident on the street, life seemed to return to normal on the surface, but for the girl, everything felt different. The memory of what had happened replayed in her mind constantly, like a film she could not pause or stop. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the officer's surprised expression, the brief chaos of the crowd, and the spray in her hand that had caused so much trouble. Even though she had acted instinctively, she could not shake the feeling that she had crossed a line. She wondered if people would judge her forever, if they would see her as someone dangerous or reckless, rather than someone who had simply panicked in a difficult moment. Her friends and family had learned about the incident by now. Some called to check if she was okay, while others expressed concern about the consequences she might face. Her parents, although proud that she had stayed calm after the initial shock, gently reminded her about the importance of restraint and careful thinking. They did not scold her harshly, instead, they spoke with a mix of understanding and guidance. They knew she had acted out of fear, but they also wanted her to learn from the experience. This blend of support and advice made the girl feel both comforted and challenged, as if she were being pushed toward maturity through a difficult lesson. At school and in her community, whispers and subtle glances followed her. She could sense that people were talking about her, trying to piece together what had happened. Some looked at her with sympathy, recognizing the fear and pressure she had faced. Others seemed to judge her quietly, as if her single action defined who she was. The girl realized that perception could be far harsher than reality, and she began to understand the importance of how she presented herself in public. She felt a strong desire to regain control of her narrative, to show that she was thoughtful, kind, and responsible, despite the fear-driven incident. Meanwhile, the officer involved in the incident continued his routine, but with a new awareness. He could not forget the way the girl had acted, nor the intensity of the moment. He often reflected on how fear can influence human behavior, and he thought about the importance of empathy in his role. He shared some of his thoughts with colleagues, explaining that while rules and training are essential, understanding human psychology can prevent unnecessary escalation. His reflection became a personal mission, to handle future incidents with even more awareness and compassion, while teaching others in his department to do the same. The local community also responded in its own ways. Neighborhood meetings discussed public safety, interactions with authority, and the need for awareness on both sides. People shared stories, asked questions, and tried to find ways to ensure such tense moments could be avoided in the future. For many, the incident became a topic for discussion not just about fear or misunderstanding, but also about education, communication, and trust within the community. The girl sometimes overheard these conversations, and she felt a mix of embarrassment and hope. Embarrassment for being at the center of the story, and hope that positive change could come from what had happened. At home, she spent hours reflecting on her own behavior. She realized that fear had taken over her judgment, but she also recognized that her instincts had protected her in a confusing and tense situation. She wrote in a journal, describing everything she remembered from that day, from the moment she noticed the officer, to the split-second decision to use the spray, to the crowd's reactions. Writing helped her organize her thoughts and emotions, allowing her to see the complexity of the moment more clearly. She understood that this was not simply a story of right or wrong, it was a story about instinct, reaction, and human imperfection. The days following the incident brought some unexpected developments. The officer, who had taken the time to document the event carefully, recommended that no charges be pressed, recognizing the girl's lack of harmful intent and her cooperation throughout the investigation. When the girl learned this, she felt a profound sense of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She realized that accountability does not always mean punishment, it can also mean understanding, learning, and moving forward responsibly. Even with this relief, the girl felt compelled to make amends in her own way. She reached out to her community, speaking with local groups about safety and awareness, sharing her experience to help others understand how fear can influence actions. Her honest and reflective approach surprised many, turning what could have been a source of shame into a source of insight and education. People began to admire her courage, not just for defending herself that day, but for using her experience to teach others about responsibility, empathy, and communication. Her school also recognized the importance of addressing such incidents constructively. Teachers held discussions about personal safety, emotional awareness, and how to respond calmly in stressful situations. The girl was invited to participate, not as a victim, but as someone who had navigated a complex and frightening moment with honesty and insight. Speaking in front of her peers was challenging at first, but she soon realized the power of her story. By sharing her reflections, she helped others think about their own reactions, their own fears, and the ways they might handle similar situations in the future. In parallel, the girl's personal growth accelerated. She developed a stronger sense of self-awareness, learning to recognize when fear was influencing her decisions and how to pause and assess before reacting. She practiced mindfulness, deep breathing, and careful thinking in moments of stress. This self-discipline became part of her daily routine, helping her face other challenges more confidently and calmly. The lessons from that single incident rippled through her life, shaping her interactions, friendships, and even her sense of courage. The officer, for his part, took proactive steps to ensure that other interactions with the public could be handled with even greater understanding. He led workshops for colleagues on empathy, stress management, and communication strategies during tense encounters. He emphasized that understanding human behavior, including fear and instinct, is just as important as knowing laws and procedures. His approach began to influence others, creating a culture in the department where officers considered both safety and humanity equally in their decisions. Back in her community, the girl's family noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She was more patient, more observant, and more thoughtful about her actions. She communicated her feelings more openly, showing maturity and responsibility beyond her years. Her experiences, though challenging, had strengthened her character and given her confidence in her ability to navigate difficult moments. The neighborhood itself seemed to change too. Residents began to see the importance of understanding one another, of creating spaces where fear could be acknowledged without judgment. Local initiatives started to focus on education, trust building, and safety, inspired in part by the incident that had once caused so much tension. People realized that mistakes and misunderstandings are inevitable, but they can be transformed into opportunities for growth and connection. The girl also reflected on her relationship with authority figures more broadly. She realized that fear does not always indicate danger, but rather a heightened awareness of risk. She learned to balance caution with understanding, to recognize when instincts were protecting her and when they might be clouding judgment. This balance became a key skill, helping her navigate other situations with clarity and composure. Through these experiences, she also developed a sense of responsibility to help others. She volunteered in community programs, sharing her story with younger students, helping them understand fear, instinct, and the importance of calm decision-making. Her openness encouraged empathy in others, and she began to see how her own experiences could positively impact those around her. Over time, the memory of that single moment on the street began to transform. It was no longer just a frightening incident, it became a turning point in her life. She looked back not with shame, but with a sense of understanding and gratitude. She had learned about courage, empathy, communication, and personal growth. She had seen the power of reflection, the importance of accountability, and the ways in which fear can be channeled into wisdom rather than regret. By the time several months had passed, the girl's life had evolved in subtle but meaningful ways. She faced challenges with greater patience, communicated more openly, and carried herself with a confidence born from experience. Her story became a reminder to herself and to others that even moments of fear and chaos can lead to understanding, connection, and personal growth when approached with honesty and reflection. The community, the officer, and the girl herself had all grown from the experience. What had begun as a chaotic, tense incident had become a catalyst for learning, empathy, and positive change. Each participant had gained insight into themselves, into others, and into the complex nature of human interaction. And as she walked through her neighborhood one evening, observing the calm streets and familiar faces, the girl understood that life is full of unexpected moments. Some moments challenge us, some frighten us, and some teach us lessons we could not have learned otherwise. What mattered was how we responded, how we reflected, and how we used those experiences to become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate human beings. After months had passed since the incident, life for the girl felt calmer, yet she carried the lessons from that day with her in everything she did. The street where it had happened no longer seemed frightening, but it still reminded her of the strength she had discovered in herself. She had grown more confident, more patient, and more thoughtful, and she could now look back at the incident not as something to fear or regret, but as a turning point that had shaped who she was becoming. School had changed too. Teachers and classmates had noticed her new sense of maturity. She no longer acted impulsively in moments of stress, and she had learned to communicate her feelings calmly, even when others were upset or tense. Friends often came to her for advice because they admired how she had handled herself, and she was proud not in a boastful way, but quietly, because she understood the value of self-control and reflection. Her experience had given her a wisdom beyond her years, and it became a guiding light in her daily life. The girl also strengthened her relationships with her family. Her parents noticed that she had developed a new level of empathy and understanding. She listened to them more carefully and spoke with thoughtfulness that had not been there before. She also shared her reflections with younger siblings and cousins, helping them understand how to handle fear, stress, and conflict. Her experience had transformed her into a mentor of sorts within her own family, someone who could guide others not through authority, but through understanding and example. Her connection with the officer involved in the incident evolved as well. The department had arranged a community outreach program where residents could meet officers in safe, informal settings. The girl participated, not as a complainant or witness, but as someone who had learned important lessons. She and the officer spoke about their experiences, about fear, instinct, and the importance of calm decision-making. People in the audience listened carefully, appreciating the honesty and mutual respect in their conversation. The officer acknowledged that although the situation had been tense, it had offered him insights into human behavior and empathy that he would carry forward in his career. Through this dialogue, the girl realized that people could see the same event from very different perspectives. For her, it had been terrifying and confusing; for the officer, it had been surprising and challenging. By sharing their stories together, they demonstrated that understanding and cooperation were more powerful than judgment and conflict. This became one of the most important lessons of her life, that fear and misunderstanding do not have to lead to division, but can instead be transformed into dialogue, empathy, and growth. The local community continued to respond positively. Workshops, seminars, and neighborhood discussions focused on communication, personal safety, and empathy. The girl became a familiar figure in these efforts, speaking openly about her experiences and encouraging others to reflect on their own reactions. She helped younger children understand that fear is natural, but it can be managed with calm thinking and careful decision-making. She encouraged adults to consider the perspectives of others and to approach tense situations with patience and understanding. Slowly, the neighborhood became a place where people felt more connected, more supported, and more aware of one another's experiences. At school, she continued to grow academically and socially. Her teachers noticed that she approached challenges differently than before. Where she had once been easily frustrated, she now faced difficulties with patience and determination. She helped classmates work through problems, both academic and personal, offering advice grounded in her experiences. This leadership did not make her arrogant or prideful; instead, it made her approachable and trusted. Her journey from fear to understanding had created a model of resilience for those around her. Meanwhile, she also took time for personal reflection. Journaling became a regular habit, allowing her to process emotions, set goals, and acknowledge personal growth. Each entry reminded her of the lessons she had learned, the importance of pause before action, the power of empathy, the value of honesty, and the strength that comes from facing fear instead of avoiding it. Over time, these reflections helped her not just cope with difficult situations, but transform them into opportunities for learning and personal development. The officer, too, continued to engage with the community, sharing his experiences and encouraging dialogue. He emphasized that his role was not only to enforce rules but also to understand the people he served. His willingness to learn from an incident that initially seemed chaotic inspired his colleagues and earned the respect of residents. Together, he and the girl became symbols of cooperation and understanding, showing that even tense encounters can become lessons in patience, compassion, and growth. As the girl's confidence grew, she also discovered new opportunities. She became involved in local initiatives aimed at helping youth navigate difficult situations. She spoke at events, led small workshops, and mentored younger students, sharing the story of that day not to frighten them, but to teach them about courage, careful thinking, and empathy. Her ability to turn a frightening moment into a lesson for others was admired widely. People began to see her not as the girl involved in the incident but as a young leader, someone capable of inspiring change and understanding. Her community involvement brought her closer to neighbors and friends. People recognized the sincerity of her efforts, and they responded with trust and support. The girl felt a deep sense of connection, realizing that human relationships could grow stronger when fear and misunderstanding were addressed honestly. The memory of the incident no longer haunted her; instead, it served as a reminder of how challenges could be turned into opportunities for learning, connection, and positive action. Even in her personal life, the lessons of that day influenced her interactions. She became a better listener, more patient in disagreements, and more compassionate toward others' fears and concerns. When friends or classmates acted impulsively out of fear or stress, she helped them navigate their emotions calmly. She learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act wisely despite it. Looking back, she realized that the incident had changed her in ways she could not have imagined. She had gained empathy, self-awareness, patience, and courage. She had learned that fear is natural, but reflection and understanding are powerful tools for growth. She had discovered that sharing experiences, listening carefully, and acting thoughtfully can transform conflict into cooperation. Most importantly, she had realized that every person, even those in authority or positions of power, has the capacity to learn, change, and understand. The girl's story became a symbol in her community, a reminder that even difficult and frightening moments could lead to positive transformation. Teachers, neighbors, and local leaders often cited her experience as an example of resilience and personal growth. She never sought attention or praise, but her honesty, courage, and reflection naturally inspired those around her. She understood that her actions on that one day did not define her entirely, but they had shaped her character in meaningful ways. As time went on, the girl focused on her goals and dreams. She approached her studies with dedication, pursued hobbies and interests with enthusiasm, and continued to mentor younger peers. She knew that challenges would continue to come, but she felt prepared to face them with the skills she had learned: calm thinking, empathy, careful decision-making, and courage. Her journey had taught her that life is full of unexpected moments, and the way we respond to them can determine not only our own growth, but also the impact we have on others. In the evenings, when she walked through the streets near her home, she sometimes thought about the officer and the moment that had changed everything. She no longer felt fear or regret. Instead, she felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons, for the guidance of her family, for the support of her community, and even for the challenge itself. That day had tested her, frightened her, and pushed her to her limits, but it had also taught her the most important truths about courage, empathy, and human connection. The girl's family also noticed the change. They saw a young woman who had faced fear, reflected deeply, and grown stronger. They felt proud not because she had acted perfectly, but because she had learned, grown, and used her experience to help others. The bonds within the family deepened, built on trust, understanding, and shared reflection. And in her community, the story of that incident continued to inspire dialogue and learning. People discussed fear, empathy, and the importance of communication. They recognized that every person has moments of weakness, confusion, or fear, but that these moments can be transformed through reflection and understanding. The girl had become a living example of this truth, showing that even a single incident, no matter how intense or frightening, can lead to growth, connection, and positive change. Years later, she would remember that day not as a moment of shame, but as a turning point. It had taught her that fear is temporary, but lessons learned through courage and reflection can last a lifetime. It had shown her the power of honesty, empathy, and understanding. And most importantly, it had revealed the potential for human beings to turn challenges into opportunities to grow stronger, wiser, and more compassionate with each experience. The girl had started as someone frightened and unsure, reacting instinctively to an unexpected moment. She had ended up as someone thoughtful, courageous, and influential, able to inspire others through her example. The journey had been long and challenging, but every step had been worth it. She had discovered that strength is not measured by fearlessness, but by the ability to reflect, learn, and act with purpose.